The Middle East crisis is escalating dramatically this Monday night, with the war spreading rapidly and confusion mounting over America's ultimate strategy. This is not simply a regime change conflict, and the duration of the war remains a pressing question. Meanwhile, stranded Canadian citizens are urgently wondering when they might be able to return home, as airspace closures and flight bans keep them trapped. Adding to the global tensions, soaring oil prices reflect the deepening impact of the conflict. There appears to be no swift solution in sight. This is Global National with Donna Fan. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The conflict ignited by Israel and the United States through aerial assaults targeting Iran is now expanding swiftly. Despite the assassination of Iran's supreme leader and several key figures, Iran retains significant capacity to resist and retaliate. What unfolds next and the war's length remain highly uncertain. The United States and Israel have conducted thousands of strikes on Iranian targets. According to Iran's Red Crescent, the death toll has exceeded 500, including the tragic loss of more than 150 lives at a girls' school. In response, Iran has launched missiles and drones into Israel, where at least 10 have died, and has also targeted American bases and U.S. allies throughout the region. The U.S. military confirms 6 American service members killed with 18 others seriously wounded. The U.S. president, who came into office promising to end wars rather than start them today, refrained from ruling out the deployment of ground troops and remained deliberately vague on the war's timeline, stating, "Whatever it takes, we will always end." And from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have the capability to go far longer than that. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of Defense assured that this would not be an endless conflict. He contrasted America's decisive military actions with the hesitation of many traditional allies, saying, "Unlike those who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing over the use of force, America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is launching the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history." Iran has turned its attention to its oil-rich neighbors, targeting military bases, oil refineries, and even civilian areas. Hezbollah and Lebanon have now entered the fray, increasing the number of involved countries to nearly a dozen. Our top story tonight from Redmond Shannon details the war's widening front. On Monday, Israeli airstrikes hit southern Lebanon and Beirut, resulting in at least 50 fatalities. These strikes came in retaliation for Hezbollah's rocket attacks on an Israeli military base. Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant Lebanese group, launched those attacks as vengeance for the assassination of Iran's Ayatollah. Regional tensions have escalated further. Saudi Arabia has closed its largest oil refinery following a drone strike on the crucial Persian Gulf facility. Meanwhile, Qatar reported an incident that halted natural gas production after claiming to have shot down 2 Iranian jets. In the Mediterranean, an Iranian drone struck a British Royal Air Force base in Cyprus, bringing the conflict into the European Union nation that hosts UK military forces. Interestingly, the United Kingdom deliberately abstained from joining the initial strikes on Iran by the US and Israel. Mere hours after these strikes, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a notable statement regarding the UK's position. US bombers are now permitted to operate from certain UK bases, but only with the mission to strike Iranian missile sites, a distinction that likely makes little difference to Iran itself. Across the Middle East, from the bustling streets of Dubai to the cityscape of Tel Aviv, people find themselves anxiously watching the skies, caught between fear and astonishment. Recently, 3 US F-15 fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by KD air defenses, yet fortunately all the pilots survived. Despite this, the conflict remains laser-focused on Iran. For the 3rd day in a row, US and Israeli forces have launched bombings on Iranian targets, showing no signs of stepping back or de-escalating tensions from either side. In response, Iran's Interim Leadership Council convened for the first time, stepping in before the election of a new supreme leader. While many key figures within the regime are absent, the government itself stands firm, fighting largely on its own without visible support. Its ally Russia has condemned the U.S. and Israeli actions, accusing them of seeking regime change. This aligns with Russia's own controversial stance and experience, having attempted regime change in Ukraine in 2022. That conflict is now entering its 5th year. Since the bombing campaign against Iran kicked off, former President Trump has been reaching out to journalists, discussing shifting timelines and evolving objectives for the war. These goals have ranged widely, from championing freedom for the Iranian people to aiming to dismantle Iran's nuclear programs, ballistic missile capabilities, and naval forces. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of Defense made it clear today that while this war is not a repeat of the Iraq conflict, the consequences it could unleash remain uncertain. Reflecting concerns about potential retaliation, the U.S. State Department is advising American citizens in 14 regional countries to leave via commercial flights if they can a move signaling heightened fears for American safety. Jackson Proko reports that in his first public remarks after ordering strikes on Iran, President Trump outlined the aims of this unprecedented military campaign. He declared this operation as the last best chance to eliminate threats from what he described as a sick and sinister regime. But without presenting new evidence, Trump claimed Iran was nearing the capability to develop missiles that could target the continental United States. This was despite his previous boasts about having dismantled Iran's nuclear program through strikes carried out last year. He criticized Iran for ignoring warnings and continuing to pursue nuclear weapons relentlessly. The U.S. Secretary of State informed congressional leaders that the administration's decision to act was based largely on the threat posed by a ballistic missile. He stated unequivocally there absolutely was an imminent threat, adding that they expected Iran to retaliate immediately if attacked. As American losses grow and regional instability spreads, the president suggested that the military campaign might last anywhere between 4 to 5 weeks. Notably, he did not specify what conditions would mark the end of this conflict. "We will easily prevail," he stated confidently. "We're already substantially ahead of our timeline projections." Trump emphasized that this was not a regime change war, though he asserted that the regime had in fact changed and argued that the world is better for it. At the Pentagon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense offered a more sober assessment, highlighting the uncertain road ahead in this volatile conflict. As we look ahead, we understand the grim reality that more American casualties in combat are likely. We anticipate additional losses but remain committed to doing everything possible to minimize American deaths. This ongoing conflict, with its unclear objectives and no defined endpoint, sees the Trump administration leaving options open for further escalation. Notably, it had not ruled out deploying U.S. troops on the ground in Iran, signaling a readiness to go as far as necessary to advance American interests. How far that will be depends not only on ambiguous goals, but also on how much Americans are willing to support a war launched without a clear rationale. Amid these tense moments, the U.S. and Israel are defending against a relentless barrage of Iranian and Hezbollah missile attacks. However, the supply of interceptors, missiles designed to shoot down incoming threats, is reportedly dwindling fast. This depletion could become a significant limiting factor for the duration of U.S. operations in the region. Current stocks are already dangerously low, and if Iranian attacks persist at this pace, these interceptors could be exhausted in just a few days, not only in Israel, but throughout other Gulf nations as well. Iran's strategy exploits the cost disparity by deploying large numbers of relatively inexpensive attack drones, which quickly drain the supply of multi-million-dollar American interceptor missiles. Many of these interceptors were already consumed during last year's intense 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran, and their inventories have yet to be replenished. Shifting focus to Canada's international efforts, Canada's Prime Minister has publicly stated his support for the United States in preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon and threatening global peace and security. Having concluded his trade mission in India, the Prime Minister is now en route to Australia. Ahead of his departure, reporter Mackenzie Gray shared insights on the achievements made in India. After years of frosty relations, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and India have remarkably turned a new page. This isn't just a restoration of diplomatic ties, but an expansion into a next-level partnership. Both sides showered each other with praise. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called Carney a friend and credited him entirely for the improved relations. This goodwill is backed by substantial commercial agreements worth $5.50 billion, including the largest deal of $2.60 billion for Saskatchewan uranium destined for Indian nuclear facilities. All these agreements, consolidated under the One Planet Initiative, mark the beginning of a prosperous new relationship with generational opportunities in sight. Canada and India have also inaugurated a new defense dialogue. This is significant given that just 3 years ago, the Canadian government accused India of involvement in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen and Sikh activist. The Prime Minister's office declined to say whether Carney raised this delicate issue with Modi during the meetings. Notably, Mark Carney has refrained from taking questions from reporters while in India, canceling a scheduled press conference as his meetings with Modi ran long. In his absence, Foreign Affairs Minister stepped in and for the first time, distanced herself from a high-level official response concerning public security matters. A government official speaking to reporters before the trip asserted that India is no longer involved in murders, violence, and extortion activities in Canada. However, the words from this senior official are not ones I would personally use. That was Mackenzie Gray with the report. Joining me now from Ottawa is our chief political correspondent, David Aiken. David, the government's messaging here seems quite confusing. On one hand, there's a claim that interference from the Indian government has ceased. On the other, there's still some indication that it might persist. What's your take on this? Well, Don, what the Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said is probably the clearest message we've had so far. Essentially, she distanced herself from the statements made by that senior government official who briefed reporters before the trip started. Since then, at least 4 Liberal MPs, including the Secretary of State for Combating Crime, Ruby Sahota, have rejected that official's conclusion. Moreover, CS, Canada's counterintelligence agency, told Global News today that their threat assessment remains unchanged regarding the primary perpetrators of foreign interference. This directly contradicts the senior official's claim that India no longer poses a threat. Interestingly, the person we've yet to hear from is the Prime Minister himself. As Mackenzie pointed out, during his entire 4-day trip to India, he did not take a single question from Global News or any other reporters traveling with him. David, shifting gears a bit, I want to ask about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's support for the U.S. strike on Iran. He was quick to issue a statement following the U.S. air assault, but he has drawn criticism, including from some liberals within his own party. Yes, that's correct, Don. The Prime Minister is facing some backlash. But if we recall what he said in Davos and other forums, he emphasized that we must accept the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. So in my view, Trudeau feels Canada had limited choice but to support the major power it neighbors, the United States, rather than siding with Iran, which is seen as the state sponsor of terrorism. His support also aligns with his observation in Davos that we now live in an era where great powers pay little heed to international law. Of course, it would be ideal to hear Trudeau himself explain his stance, but since he avoided all questions in India, we'll have to wait and see if he takes any when he arrives in Australia. Thanks, David Aiken in Ottawa. Turning to another matter, Canadians have been warned against traveling to several countries in the region amid escalating conflicts, and numerous airlines have suspended hundreds of flights. This has left many travelers stranded, including tens of thousands of Canadians. Our correspondent E.D. Petrick reports on the options available to those stuck abroad. The footage shows the skies near Doha on Sunday night, where Iranian missiles and drones were being intercepted mid-air. Aside from the defense activity, the city remained eerily quiet, with officials urging everyone to avoid going outside. Among those affected are Canadians who find themselves caught in this unsettling situation. Thousands of travelers found themselves stranded as flights were disrupted. Early this morning, there were loud explosions that jolted some of us awake, but since then, things have been relatively quiet. Among those affected are 16 students from Queen's University who were returning from a field trip in Sri Lanka when their flight was suddenly diverted to Doha. Fortunately, the airline is covering their hotel accommodations and meals. Stephen Loade, the professor accompanying the group, deserves immense gratitude for his leadership during this challenging time. Also with Dan Gordon's daughter. To any of the students watching this report, please know that your families and friends are thinking about you every moment. We landed just minutes before the airspace was officially closed. Meanwhile, fitness instructor Rachel Draghi is currently in Kuwait and was scheduled to leave on Sunday. She hasn't yet pursued an exit plan, but is hoping that flights will become available by then. The unfolding situation has global repercussions, and it's crucial for everyone to develop multiple backup plans, like Plan B and Plan C, following the strikes on Iran. Over 3,000 flights were canceled. The UAE has pledged to cover hotel stays and meals for all travelers impacted. Emirates Airlines announced on Monday that it would resume a limited number of flights by evening, and Dubai airports also declared they would restart partial operations. Canadians stranded in the region are feeling cautious. One individual shared, "As much as I want to leave, there are still explosions. I don't know if it's safe to fly out yet." Some have expressed frustration with what they perceive as a slow response from the federal government. Every time they've contacted the Canadian embassy about the emergency, they're told that there's no new information to share. Reports suggest that the British government may be planning to evacuate stranded UK nationals, but so far Ottawa hasn't confirmed whether similar efforts are underway. Global Affairs Canada advises Canadians in the area to prepare contingency plans that do not rely on government assistance. This update comes from Heidi Petrajic, Global News, Halifax.NL. Turning to the financial impact of the Middle East crisis. Today's market saw significant volatility as investors evaluated the war's effects. Oil prices surged, with Brent crude jumping past $77 US per barrel, reaching a peak not seen in months. The Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply passes, has been closed, and Iran has launched attacks on oil refineries. Heather Urix West reports from the front lines of these developments. Off the coast of Oman, an oil tanker is ablaze near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, thick smoke billows from Saudi Arabia's largest refinery following a drone strike that forced its shutdown. These scenes of turmoil across the Middle East are causing a spike in global oil prices. Analysts warn a swift resolution is unlikely in this oil-dependent region, especially given that the Strait of Hormuz handles a massive percentage of the world's oil transport. Iran seems unlikely to cease its aggressive stance. Situated between Oman and Iran, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical choke points in energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz stands as the world's most crucial oil choke point, acting as the vital gateway between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. Every single day, around 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through this narrow channel, an amount that dwarfs Canada's current oil exports by 5 times. We're here to offer support in navigating this energy landscape. One way we can contribute is by expanding the pipelines on the West Coast, which is key to handling surging oil prices. This rise in oil prices brings a boost to the Alberta government as it pushes forward new pipeline projects, helping to offset an almost $10 billion deficit caused by previous downturns in crude prices. Our forecasts for Budget 26 suggest that with each $1 increase in the price of West Texas Intermediate, there's about a $680 positive impact. Last spring, oil prices dipped below $60 a barrel, but they surged dramatically in 2025 after the U.S. launched attacks on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran on June 22nd. Following a period of instability in the region, prices gradually decreased throughout the rest of the year. The current oil price surge closely mirrors the peak observed in June last year. However, should there be a prolonged disruption to supply from the Persian Gulf, we might see even steeper price increases. Fuel prices across Canada are expected to rise by 8 to 13 cents per liter over the next week or two, reflecting this global trend. Natural gas prices are also climbing sharply after a major producer halted output on Monday. This is significant since the country supplies roughly 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Eric's reporting for Global News Calgary. Looking ahead to FIFA tourism this summer, Canada is emerging as a safe haven for soccer fans, especially given recent uncertainties with other host nations. Iran's national soccer team is slated to participate in the upcoming World Cup, which Canada, the United States, and Mexico are set to co-host, yet their involvement is now uncertain. The United States has placed visa restrictions on several countries, while in Mexico, escalating violence from drug cartels has raised alarm bells. These developments made Canada arguably the safest destination for World Cup enthusiasts. Eric Sorensen explains that the World Cup scale is unprecedented. 3 host countries, 48 teams, and promotions from FIFA that paint a picture of a whirlwind global festival. Never before have so many nations competed or so many cities welcomed fans. Still, political tensions are impacting the atmosphere. For example, President Trump's stringent immigration policies, including crackdowns on undocumented immigrants, tighter visa controls, alongside increasing military engagements in the Middle East, have caused many potential visitors to think twice about attending. Meanwhile, images of violence in Mexico and increased security measures after the assassination of a drug cartel leader have only heightened concerns. Many tourism operators are now promoting Canada as the premier peaceful destination for World Cup visitors. This shift is reflected in travel patterns. While visits to Canada from US residents fell by 2.9% last year, overseas arrivals increased by 7.5%, partly due to strained US relations. Despite these challenges, cities like Vancouver and Toronto are bracing for a surge in international guests this year, thanks to hosting 13 World Cup matches between them. Vancouver will welcome teams and fans from Australia, Europe, and the Middle East, while Toronto is primed to host similarly diverse crowds. Let's look ahead to Germany. Teams from Africa, Latin America, and even more countries yet to join the roster. Among all, the 2 Canadian cities, known for their incredible diversity, are expected to be among the most sought-after destinations worldwide during the event. Travelers today prioritize destinations where they can feel genuinely welcome and safe. Canada currently shines brightly in this regard, standing out as a place that people truly feel embraced and secure. However, uncertainty remains around Iran's soccer team participating in the World Cup, especially with all three of its matches scheduled on US soil. Despite this, millions of fans from around the globe are set to travel to North America this summer, eager to avoid geopolitical tensions and enjoy sports within a warm, inviting atmosphere. This environment could very well establish Canada as the top choice for a growing number of World Cup enthusiasts. Reporting from Toronto, this is Eric Sorensen with Global News. In other news, a remarkable rediscovery in the art world has made headlines. A precious Rembrandt painting, missing from public view for years, has finally resurfaced. Contrary to expectations, it was residing quietly in a private home and is now generously loaned to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Art historians dedicated 2 years to meticulous research, ultimately confirming its authenticity as an original Rembrandt masterpiece. The painting is titled Vision of Zacharias in the Temple. While its precise value remains undisclosed, the highest price ever paid for a Rembrandt at auction surpassed 36 million Canadian dollars. This rare find is sure to captivate art lovers worldwide.